Across the primary telemetry board screamed 4,400 targeting locks. In the center of the grid, 17 solitary ships sat perfectly motionless. No deflector shields. No evasive burns. Trivac watched the raw data feed from his observation booth deep within the obsidian spire. They simply drifted. Their main power grids diverted entirely away from defense, bleeding energy into the void like a dying star. Trivac's optical ridges tightened. He expected panic. He saw only a terrifying, deliberate stillness. The silence that followed the flash was louder than any weapon. I'll explain how an empire vanished if you stay close. 70 hours earlier, the greatest threat on the silver lining had been a ceramic cup. Garrick Wren possessed a terrifying habit of balancing steaming meat broth directly on the central processing console during orbital calibrations. Trivac had cataloged the spill risk with clinical anxiety. Senna, their commander, treated the impending war with equal disregard. She lounged in her command chair with her crash harness unbuckled. Her primary communication channel remained carelessly open to public frequencies. She looked like a civilian on a pleasure cruise, entirely unbothered by the shadow of the hegemon falling over her sector. Before the Vanguard fleet mobilized, she had stood at the central podium of the spire. Exarch Xyrax demanded the immediate surrender of the Gossamer dynasty's territory, specifically the resource-rich Nebula Fringe. Yield the Glimmer Lanes, the Exarch had declared, or face absolute and irreversible annihilation. Senna had tapped the microphone. She officially rejected the demand before the entire galactic assembly in one breath. "We brought fewer ships than you expected," she broadcasted across the network, "so that we could make every one of them matter." Trivac processed her arrogance as a biological defect. 17 civilian haulers against the Iron Vanguard was a mathematical absurdity. A standard centralized processing core, like those utilized by Vanguard dreadnoughts, handled targeting and shielding through a singular, rigid command hierarchy. Destroy the flagship, break the fleet. These Gossamer ships registered differently on the Spire sensors. Their internal architecture lacked a central hub. They functioned via distributed processing, sharing computational load evenly across all 17 connected hulls. Each ship acted as a single neuron in a massive, floating brain. 40 Vanguard scouting vessels entered the Nebula Fringe for a punitive strike. To intercept them moved the Silver Lining and its 16 sister ships. Trivac watched the power routing data with growing pity. Instead of charging weapons, the human vessels began synchronizing their data streams. They pushed toward a 98.7% coherence rate. To Trivac's cultural understanding, this was a documented behavioral pattern. The humans were compiling a death archive. Fragile species often dumped their historical databases into a single broadcast packet before destruction. The Vanguard scouts locked their weapons. Over the open comms channel, the unmistakable sound of Garrick taking a slow sip from his ceramic cup echoed through the Spire's observation booth. Steam curled over the navigator's tactical display. Senna left her harness hanging loose over the armrests. Trivac adjusted his visual filters, preparing to log the vaporization of the small Gossamer fleet. The coherence rate hit 99%. Then, the lattice activated. Vanished the 40 Vanguard vessels. 11 seconds. No twisted debris fields. No scattered escape pods. No frantic distress signals bleeding into the static. Through the Spire's primary monitors, Trivac watched the telemetry data reform into empty space. His optical ridges locked in sudden, freezing comprehension. A death archive did not vaporize reinforced titanium hulls. Into a single, terrifyingly efficient organism, these human ships had networked their targeting processors. Across the observation booth's intercepted audio feed, a soft exhalation rustled the comms static. Garrick Wren blew gently on his steaming ceramic cup, taking a slow, careful sip of salted meat broth. Screamed the proximity alarms a fraction of a second later. 4,400 red targeting icons flooded the tactical display, painting the projection entirely in crimson. The full Iron Vanguard armada had dropped from slip space into the Nebula Fringe, locking their heavy plasma batteries onto the 17 Gossamer ships. In her command chair, Senna remained entirely unbuckled. Her open comms channel broadcast only the steady, rhythmic hum of the Silver Lining's climate control. Paralyzed by arrogance or resigned to death, she had never been. The enemy weapons, she simply knew, would never fire. To the resonator lattice, the massive armada did not register as 4,000 individual threats. The networked ships treated the incoming fleet as a single, complex variable processing equation. Deep within the Vanguard formation, Exarch Xyrax did not broadcast a glorious battle cry to rally his dreadnoughts. Trivac caught a fractured, panicked microtransmission from the flagship's bridge. Xyrax was speaking to a young subpilot named Roken, his nephew, asking in a tight whisper if the sensor baffles were glitching. They were not. Began the second stage protocol, a 3-hour execution. Over the next 3 hours, the Obsidian Spire Council watched the most devastating naval engagement in galactic history unfold in absolute, clinical silence. Never did the Gossamer ships break formation. They merely distributed the firing solutions across 17 synchronized nodes, overloading the Vanguard shields with perfectly timed harmonic feedback loops. Layer by layer, the Iron Vanguard evaporated. Entire cruiser squadrons disappeared between blinks, erased by a mathematically perfect application of energy. The power to enforce absolute galactic tyranny now sat in the hands of 17 human haulers. The Gossamer dynasty had fundamentally rewritten the geopolitical reality of the entire sector. If Senna chose to advance, no fleet could stop her. Walked Senna back into the central hall of the Spire 3 days later, a conqueror who refused to conquer. The heavy Vanguard delegation seats sat entirely empty. The remaining representatives offered only terrified silence as her boots echoed against the polished marble floor. The resonator lattice is not a weapon of conquest, Senna stated, her voice echoing across the cavernous room. It functions as a circuit breaker. To any sovereign system facing immediate annihilation, we offer the blueprints for this technology. But the tool requires our philosophical framework, or you simply become the next Vanguard. Around the edges of the Glimmer lanes formed a new mutual defense compact. Inside the Spire's observation booth, the main telemetry board displayed a perfectly clear sector map. Gone was the dense cluster of red targeting icons. On the metallic edge of the central processing console sat a small ceramic cup. Steam curled slowly upward from the rim. Perfectly still remained the dark liquid inside.